All right, good evening. It's a real honor to introduce Francis Dinkelspiel, and since we're into media innovation here, I'm going to try a new tool where I can just talk to the slide and it'll give me the information I need. So the first association with Dinkelspiel is the Dinkelspiel Auditorium, and the Dinkelspiel Auditorium, can we see a picture for that? Not a picture here, but a newspaper quote for a clipping from 1959 speaking about, it's an obituary, unfortunately, for Lloyd W. Dinkelspiel, who is the grandfather of Francis Dinkelspiel and who donated the resources for the Dinkelspiel Auditorium. And that's a fascinating story, and it starts to point back deep into the history of California. More about that later. Let's look at other entries here. Please give me a picture on Tangled Vines. There it is, the picture of the cover of the book that Francis Dinkelspiel wrote, a single-author, long-form journalist, a narrative, not a fictional narrative, an account of greed, murder, obsession, and an arsonist in the vineyards of California, the history of the wine country, which was a really successful book, still in bestseller lists, and highly recommended. It's a really exciting read, and really blends what Francis Dinkelspiel is doing, both in terms of as a historian, because she was a class of 1981 history major at Stanford, but also a journalist from the Columbia Institute, graduating. When was that actually? 86 in New York. And so Francis Dinkelspiel unites both the historic view and the journalistic view in books like this. There's another book, let's see another image here, please, Towers of Gold. Not Towers of Hanoi, come on. A Towers of Gold, there we go. Towers of Gold, a story about Zayas Hellman, who is the first banker of California. And there's a lot of funny stories and amazing stories about him and how he created a banking empire around the gold rush starting in 1859 out of a small convenience store. And it turns out that Frances is actually the great-great-granddaughter of Zayas Hellman, and so was able to write about her own family history to great acclaim. But not satisfied with all these glories, she went on to co-found Berkeleyside, which is a really amazing, vital journalistic resource, especially today as we are struggling with the period of the post-truth. You know, post-truth is the term that apparently is one of the most frequently used new words in this year, in 2016. And so in this post-truth context, a local independent website that talks about local news, hyper-local news, at a very high frequency is really a huge exception, perhaps the only instance of locally driven journalism, and we'll learn so much more about that from Frances herself. But let's finish with the introduction here. What else do we have here? Of course, we have a Twitter account, but this looks awfully messy here. Let's clean that up a little bit. Okay, that looks better. Now let's clean that up a little bit more and get rid of the Towers of Hanoi. And there we go. That's a proper introduction. Please help me welcome Francis Dinkelspiel.
How'd you do that, Greg?
It just listens and I talk.
It listens.
You want to try it?
I'll have to try it sometime.
Right.
Okay.
So you want to start with a movie?
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about...
With the slides, yeah.
So
that should work.
How do we do this now?
Now we go... there we go.
Okay, I'll start.
You're good from there.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I did go to Stanford. I graduated in 1981. My daughter even went here, but I gotta say, I got completely lost. Like, is this like some new country on this side of the campus, this engineering quad? I have no idea. It's really, really nice, though, but it took me a while to find it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about Berkeleyside, what it is and how it started, and some of the things that we're doing now that I think get us in the media innovation category, which is why Greg and Manoush asked us to be here. Berkeleyside was started by three people, myself, Lance Noble, and Tracy Taylor, who were actually on their way in 2007. We'd all been longtime reporters. We'd reported for traditional news outlets. I'd been at the Mercury News for a long time. I'd freelanced for People magazine when I left the Mercury News. I'd written for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Tracy had written a lot for the Financial Times. And Lance had been the programmer for the World Economic Forum in Davos and edited a bunch of business magazines. And we were living in Berkeley, and we were living in the time where there were huge cutbacks in local news. Starting around 2006, there was a huge retrenchment in local news. And in fact, a 2011 survey of reporters in the East Bay showed that there were only 280 reporters working in the East Bay at that time, down from a high of 1,731, an 84% reduction. And that kind of cutbacks were mirrored in San Jose, they were mirrored on the peninsula and in San Francisco. So we were watching this incredible explosion of the news business, one that the news business has never really fully recovered from. And we started to think about where were we going to be getting our local news. And we sort of on a lark decided that we were going to start a news site and just start, contribute to it occasionally and just sort of like, in the course of our normal reporting for other things, we contribute to Berkeleyside. Well, that turned out to be absolutely what didn't happen. And I'm going to show you a little video right now, if I can figure out how to make it work, about what Berkeleyside is all about. And then I'll go back to sort of how we got here. Yes, I do.
Berkeleyside is a 24/7 news source for the city of Berkeley. We write stories for our website, we put things up on Twitter and Facebook. We aim to cover Berkeley really closely and let people living here know what's going on.
As well as being a traditional online newspaper, we're also a grand experiment.
We started it really with no great ambitions, but because there was nowhere we knew where you could find out what was happening in our city.
And very quickly, Berkeleyside became an indispensable tool for people who live in Berkeley. It's something I consult every day.
When you hear a helicopter, you want to know what's going on. And it's a place to go for local news that's really good quality.
Especially the coverage of a lot of the city council meetings and the school board meetings. As a stay-at-home mom, I can't attend those, so it's just invaluable to be able to know what's going on.
It is an exciting and dynamic and controversial city. Everyone has a point of view, and people are really excited about the idea of something that helps strengthen the community.
And the things we write about, whether it's schools, whether it's development, whether it's crime, these are things that are affecting people that are our neighbors and our fellow citizens, and you really feel that immediacy.
When we are meeting as a team, we decide, what's important, what do people need to know, and how do we reflect this community as thoroughly and comprehensively as we can. It's a moving target, and we're always trying to make it better.
There's more news out there, there are videos we'd like to shoot, there are people we'd like to talk to. And we want to grow Berkeleyside to allow it to have more resources so we can do better reporting and be more responsive to the Berkeley community.
The notion of free journalism is just simply not sustainable. And if this is something we value, we should show that with our support.
So, how do I get this into full screen? Can you help me?
The little icon there. You're so close. I think this will do it.
Okay, all right, okay.
Did it? Yes.
Yes.
No, not good.
But a pretty picture, though.
There we go. Now we're
okay, great. So that's a little intro to Berkeleyside. So, one of the things that struck us immediately as we started to do this small local news site was that the way we delivered news and the relationship we had with our readers was very different than working in a traditional newspaper. I'd worked at the Mercury News for many years, and there's a huge structure, and you put out a paper, and during those times, if somebody had a complaint about a story, they could call the editor, they could call the reporter, or they could write a letter. But Berkeleyside was only ever online. And what we noticed really, really quickly was that we got immediate responses from readers about the stuff we were writing about. They would leave comments in our stories. They would tell us what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong. And this is a very important shift that's happened in journalism, and it's only accelerated with the arrival of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. The relationship between the reader and the writer has really, really shrunk. So it used to be that I would write a story for the Mercury News. I'd research it all day. I'd turn it in around 4 o'clock. My editor would read it. It would be slated to be published the next day in the paper. And I would go home and I would feed my kids. I'd go to the movies. I'd do whatever. There was this sort of like nice kind of rhythm to the news. I mean, occasionally there'd be breaking news that would, take you out of your comfort zone. But there was this sort of very organized relationship between writing and readership. Well, that has been completely blown up, and it's completely blown up on Berkeleyside. And it's a very, very good thing in so many ways. It makes reporters much more responsive. It makes people living in a community feel that they're part of making the news, but it also is much, much more demanding. What we have found, here's a beautiful picture of Berkeley, is that people are really desperate to know about what is happening in their particular neighborhoods. They want to know why is there building going on over there? What is this new project that the city council is interested in? Why are there people walking down the streets? They really, want to know, what is making up the fabric of their community. So it used to be a traditional journalist. You'd go out, you'd start out in City Hall, you'd work your way up until you're hopefully covering national politics. And that was sort of the epitome of what you were trying to reach. But sort of these small local sites are completely backward. Like the pinnacle is really covering those city council meetings. And it's not like it's necessarily all so much fun. It's just that what people in a community, they really want to know about. And so what's been happening at Berkeleyside is, I'll be sometimes sitting in my bed at night and, reading or watching TV, and all of a sudden there'll be a tweet, and it'll say, "Shots fired on Acton Street. What's going on?" And it'll be followed soon by other tweets saying, "I heard this, I heard that, I heard this." And so that does two things. It gives us information that we can use to either retweet or to put on our sites. It gives us information to go out to the police department and say, "We're hearing about all these things. Can you tell us what's going on?" And it sort of creates this fluidity in reporting of the news. I mean, a lot of the news that Berkeleyside gets are tips from readers through email or Twitter or Facebook and stuff like that. And it's very, very different from traditional journalism and how it used to be. And so I think, this had been going on for quite a while, but we really had a transformational moment in December 2014. When one night, December 6th, a bunch of students decided to protest against the killing of Michael Brown. And they went out around 5 o'clock on the campus and they did an orderly protest. But for some reason, the protest started to grow. And by 6:30, there was a large crowd downtown who did an impromptu die-in in the middle of Shattuck Avenue, which is one of the big streets in Berkeley. And that brought a lot of police from all over. And all of a sudden, thousands and thousands of people were converging on Berkeley to protest the killing of Michael Brown. And the police called for a lot of mutual aid, so all of a sudden there were thousands of police officers too. And without anyone really expecting it, it turned into a full-fledged protest. And we were reporting this. We had done a little bit about the early part of the protests. And then all of a sudden we saw that this was growing into something really, really big. So we started to do live blogging of what was going on. And we sent a reporter out on the street to tell us and feed us back information. But we didn't only use her to gather information. All of a sudden we had readers tweeting things at us, taking video and emailing it to us, putting stuff up on Facebook. And we all of a sudden had a torrent of information coming our way. And we ended up sort of putting up that information on the site. And the protest ended up going on for 4 days. Here are a couple of pictures. The UC Berkeley students, marched down University Avenue and they got on the freeways and they blocked the freeways. And on the first night, the police used tear gas to subdue the protesters. And this was one of the first times that they had used tear gas in a long time, and that was very controversial in Berkeley. But what we ended up doing was having this live blog that we started around 6:30 p.m. and we ran it that night, and then we started again next night when it turned out that there were going to be more protests, and we ended up running live blogs and updates all nights until about 2:45 a.m. in the morning. And it was really an amazing feeling. Tracy, you were there. I mean, it was, as I said, transformative, because we were sitting in the kitchen of my house, and we were being it felt like we were the center of something. And we were the people who were responsible for sort of taking all this information, crafting it, and pushing it back out on the community. And of course, there were other news organizations that were also trying to do the same thing, but we had developed a relationship with our readers that sort of made them send us a lot of information. And that night, we got about 366 comments on that one particular story. And throughout the month of December, we ended up getting more than 1 million page views, which was a huge number for us, because so many people were coming to Berkeleyside time and time again in order to find out what was going on. And, I just think that this is such an interesting change in what journalism is about now. It's no longer a one-way street. It's really a relationship with viewers. And so since 2014, we've really built on that relationship. I think, just even in the last couple of years, the use of Twitter and the use of Facebook has really increased. I mean, we now, most people come to our site through Twitter or Facebook. They don't go to the landing page like they used to. And we're constantly trying to distribute our news on various different platforms in order to get the news out. So I just wanted to show you a couple of statistics about Berkeleyside. This is just a snapshot of where we are now. I think what's interesting, we've published 12,500 stories. We have had more than 200,000 comments left on our stories. And we have lots of Twitter followers and Facebook followers. And, it is really our community that drives the news. They often tell us what's going on. So, for example, I woke up this morning, and what did I find? I found these tweets about a homeless encampment, and complete with great pictures. And in Berkeley, we've been having a lot of issues with a particular group of homeless activists who want to have the city let them have their own space in a deserted, lot or on a piece of grass. And they've been playing sort of this game with the city of Berkeley where they'll set up tents in a populated area. The city will allow them to stay there for a while. Then the city will come in and raid the encampment, and the group will just, get up and move a couple blocks away. And so this has been going on really for a couple of years. But during the last 3 weeks, there have been about 3 or 4 of these sort of scenarios where encampment, police activity, new encampment. And so this morning, the police came around 4:30 a.m. and rousted the homeless encampment, which was right by the high school and City Hall. And this is a picture of them trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And actually, I had to leave to come down here. I don't know where they set up next, but I'm sure if I looked on my Twitter feed, I probably would have a really good idea. Yes?
So just a quick question. Do you have to do fact-checking and other things of the tweets and things that are coming in?
So the question is, we do fact-checking on the tweets? Yes and no. It really depends on the circumstances. I mean, we have on our little, Twitter headline, a retweet does not mean that we agree with it. But this is somebody who regularly tweets at us. We get to know the people who tweet at us a lot of times. I recognize what these pictures are. I don't think that they'll be doctored or anything. And I did reach out to her and ask her if I could use them, and she said yes. So we do not automatically retweet. So, for example, another person sent a tweet this morning with a hashtag like, let's take back Berkeley police. The new mayor promised that he wouldn't do this. And so I had just done a big interview with the mayor, and I know that that's not what he said. So I didn't retweet that. So, we're not perfect. Sometimes we make mistakes in what we retweet, but we generally try to err on the conservative side. So the reason I wanted to tell you a little bit about the relationship with the community that we have is because that is sort of what we're using in order to allow Berkeleyside to grow. So when we started, there were 3 of us. We quickly took on a 4th partner, a woman who knows how to do ad sales. And in 2012, we hired a full-time reporter, and now we have a staff of about 7. We have 1 half-time editor for food, 2 salespeople, and the 3 co-founders. And so the way we've been making that work is through 3 different revenue streams. We primarily sell ads. That brings in about 60% of our revenue. And they're mostly local and regional ads. They're ads from, a local store, or there might be the hospital ads, or the San Francisco Symphony will advertise. We also have a robust membership program where we tell people that if you want Berkeleyside to survive, would you please join for about $5 a month or $10 a month or $25 a month. And so we now have about 1,200 members who contribute a sum to us every month, and that's been really, really helpful. And then our third revenue stream is events. I think if you look at other local news sites around the country, you'll find that they also have these 3 revenue streams. So every year we do a festival of ideas called Uncharted in October, where we bring people from around the country to come to Berkeley and sort of talk about dangerous ideas for 2 days. And we charge for tickets, and we get sponsorships, and this is another revenue stream. Now, many local news sites around the country were set up as nonprofits so that they can ask their supporters for a tax-deductible donation, or they can go and ask a foundation for money. And when we were setting Berkeleyside up in 2007, we considered very briefly about being a nonprofit. It was really sort of the hot thing to be back then. There was lots of foundation money out there for smaller news sites. A couple of them emerged in Oakland and in San Francisco. But we had the feeling that we didn't want to go down that path for a couple reasons. One, we wanted to get started really quickly, and we felt if we had to become a 501c3, it was going to take time, and reporters have no patience. And 2, we sort of thought that, foundations would grow tired of giving money to smaller sites after a period of time. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened. While, foundations are very happily giving to bigger projects like ProPublica or the Center for Investigative Reporting, I think it's become increasingly difficult for small, local-oriented sites to get foundation funds. So we didn't go down that path. But, that has still left us in a position of not really having a secure enough financial foundation to really grow the site. I mean, even though we have 3 sources of revenue and we are able to pay 4 people on the staff, the 3 founders have really taken very little financially from the site. And we have for a long time have thought this is fine. We're bootstrapping. We know we're going to get there. We know that, eventually we're going to be big enough and we're going to be strong enough that we'll have enough money flowing in. But we pivoted just in the last couple months when we decided to do something that is called a direct public offering. And this is something that is fairly new in California. It's something that's only been permitted by the state of California for a short period of time. Now, a direct public offering is going out into the community and asking community members to invest in Berkeleyside, to essentially buy shares in Berkeleyside. And there have been a number of successful DPOs in the world. Ben & Jerry's did a DPO a very, very long time ago. The Green Bay Packers is the only football team that is owned by its community, and that has done very well. But in California, it's a fairly new instrument, and there have just been a few places that have done it. Like there's something called the Oakland People's Market in Oakland, which is a food market, which has actually done 2 rounds of DPO. So what we thought was that considering that we had a very strong community, considering that we were able to actually communicate directly with our community via our website, Twitter, Facebook, emails, and that kind of thing, that we would be a good candidate for a direct public offering. And so we sort of took the plunge to do the direct public offering, and we got accredited in March to do it. And so we have launched it, and we are hoping to raise about $800,000 to do a lot of stuff with the website. So what is a direct public offering? So it's a public offering of securities by a business or nonprofit that is made both to very wealthy investors and just sort of average people. IPOs in general are supposedly geared towards people who have a lot of wealth and are able to weather any sort of financial instability. A DPO is offered to people who have normal means. I mean, probably not students, but people who are out in the work world. Our minimum investment is about $1,000. And so we formally launched our DPO, I guess, just about 6 weeks ago. We just told our readers the week before the election about the DPO, in part because the San Francisco Chronicle was running a story on us the day after the election. And so we're sort of out officially in the world. And what we have been doing is we have been really reaching out one-to-one to people to ask them to invest in Berkeleyside. We've held a couple of house parties and told people about what Berkeleyside wants to do. And it's been a very interesting reaction because what we are offering financially is if you buy stock, you would be buying preferred stock. It's not a very liquid investment. What we are telling people is that we hope to be paying a 3% dividend on the stock, and we are offering some benefits, some perks with the DPO. And those are lovely perks like books that we're making and gift baskets full of Berkeley food, and for the top investors, dinner at Chez Panisse and an ability to sleep at the Claremont Hotel. But the truth is that this is an investment that people are not making because they're hoping to become rich. But they're making it for other reasons. And we've had a lot of discussions with them about those reasons. And what we say to them is essentially that, Greg just talked about fake news. I talked about the cutback in local news. Good local journalism, good journalism, period, is in jeopardy in so many ways. And who knows now what's going to happen with President Trump. I mean, he said he wants to loosen the libel laws, which will probably be very difficult to do. But his words and his actions sort of signal the amount of dismay that a lot of people carry about news. And it's very hard to know, what news, if the news you're getting is reliable news. And so we've been going and talking to people in the house parties saying, look, Berkeleyside has been around for 7 years. We've written more than 12,000 stories. We cover city government really closely. We just wrote 159 stories for the local election. No other news site is going to be informing you as much about your community as Berkeleyside. And this is something that is worthwhile. It's something that's worth investing in. And we have been very, very pleasantly pleased by the reaction so far. We've raised $300,000 just in the last short period of time. People giving us, $10,000. We've gotten a $50,000 contribution. We've gotten multiple $1,000 contributions. And it's because people are actually understanding how significant it is to have a reliable news source for their city. And, maybe this wouldn't work as well in Palo Alto or Mountain View, maybe it would, but Berkeley is a very, very engaged community, a very engaged citizenry, and people there kind of consider themselves pioneers. I mean, that's where the free speech movement started, the disability rights movement started. It's been on the forefront, battling for gay and lesbian and transgender rights, and so people there sort of think that as a Berkeley residents, they have a stake in making sure that the future happens and it starts in Berkeley. So that has given us this, I think, this boost, and it has allowed us to really start getting some funding. So what will we do with this money once we get it? And I'm pretty confident that we're going to get it. So we have been working on a platform that we set up in 2007. We're working on a WordPress platform. It's not mobile friendly. I mean, you can, download the icon on your phone and look at Berkeleyside, but it's kind of clumsy. And so the very first thing that we're going to do is redesign our site and make it a mobile friendly site. And that will allow us to have more space for ads. We're going to use the money to really sort of prop up the revenue sides of Berkeleyside. In addition to having more space for ads, we're hoping to hire someone to do more membership for us, more membership outreach, connecting more with our members, creating opportunities for our members to interact and have parties and have lectures and things like that. We really think we can grow the membership side of Berkeleyside because we have right now we have about 200,000 unique visitors a month. And if we could just, capture a portion of that, I think it would really help our revenue stream. And the third thing that we're going to do is to do more marketing for our events, really try to reach out and penetrate larger parts of the Bay Area. I thought it was really interesting to hear tonight that most of you heard about this event through an email newsletter. Nobody saw it on a poster, and nobody read the ad in the Stanford Daily, if you had an ad. That's pretty interesting. And it just really is a reflection of how kind of inundated we are in our lives and how just sort of the online experiences really are, our new reality, and that's where most people see things. So we're really thinking that we are the first news site to do a direct public offering, as far as we know, in the United States. And it's just a California-based offering, but other states do allow it too. So we are thinking that we're going to be able to take our experience, what we do, and share it with other news sites. Because, it's very hard to make enough money just by selling ads. The numbers are terrible. I mean, even the New York Times, you see, of course, it's print advertising that's going down. It's making money through subscriptions, but it's very hard to charge enough for online ads to really make them worthwhile and to generate a lot of income. So we're really excited about having this DPO be a model for other news organizations in California in particular, and in the country if possible, depending on the state. So that's really all I have to say about the DPO now. I would, like to open it up for questions, and I'd be happy to talk more if you're interested in it about, just about, how we go about getting the news. I mean, in some ways we're very traditional. We have reporters on the ground going out, gathering information, going to meetings, interviewing people. So we still produce the news in many traditional ways. But as I said, so much of it is fed to us by our readers. So much of it comes because of our interaction with our readers. So we are this interesting blend of old and new. And, and the older I get, the news business is changing so fast. It's just sort of, I don't even know where I'm going to be next year with this, except for I'll be doing verbal commands to make my slides go forward. So, does anybody have any questions or? Yes?
I assume that you take statistics on what articles get page views. Do you look at that? What has been your process around that?
So we are not clickbait driven, though we are very aware that animal stories really do very well. And we love them. So recently we had a great story where a deer jumped into a swimming pool at a kid's middle school while kids were having a swim lesson. And that did really, really well.
Video?
No, we didn't have a video. We had, and that was something that was sent to us by a reader, right? We weren't at that school, and that was great. Crime stories do very well. People are very interested in crime. And we also do a lot of book reviews and, art reviews and theater reviews. And those don't do that well. But we feel like we want to have a well-rounded site, something that is, not just click-driven. We definitely look at our clicks, but we don't try to make story decisions based on how much traffic they're going to generate, except for the animal stories. Yeah. So. Yes.
Can you clarify the difference between the membership model and the DPO?
Yes.
I mean, is it a financial? You have to give X amount of dollars to participate in DPO versus
Yeah.
membership?
Yeah, they're very different financial models, and most likely there will be crossover between the DPO and the membership model. So we started with the membership model, and that is a model where we just ask people to voluntarily contribute to Berkeleyside. And we do try to make it a monthly donation, because once you get people signed up for PayPal or credit card, it's just an easier way to keep the revenue coming in. People don't have to remember to renew and that kind of thing. So, although people do make one-time donations. The DPO, we are going out to some of our members and asking for a minimum of a $1,000 contribution. But we're also going to people who are not necessarily our members. And, since we were not a tax-deductible organization, I mean, we never really felt like we could ask our members, hey, give us $1,000. It just felt like a very big ask, and they weren't necessarily getting very much for it. But when we talk about larger financial numbers in the context of trying to save local journalism, in the context of making sure that Berkeleyside is sustainable and will go on after the three founders retire, that really appeals to people, and they understand that, and that has made them want to sort of contribute, much, much larger sums of money. So we're going to run the two programs side by side. We're trying to raise $800,000, and once that's raised, the DPO is closed. We'll be doing events for both members, but we'll do some extra events for the investors as well. So they're definitely similar, but they're not the same. Sorry, Greg.
So it sounds like by kind of bringing people in and creating more of a 24-hour news site, I'm sure that's great for your readers, but I wonder, does it take a toll on you as reporters from a work-life balance?
Yeah, yes, it takes a huge toll. We're lucky we have one reporter who is, her favorite time to work is around midnight to 7 a.m. So, we sort of have 24/7 news coverage. Yeah, it's really, really hard. I mean, we didn't start this with the expectation that we would be doing this 24/7 site, that people would have such a need to have questions answered very, very quickly. It sort of evolved organically, and we kind of feel like we have to respond to them. I mean, this is what they're asking for, and a lot of times it's really fun. I mean, so for example, Trump was elected, and that night there were protests. There were angry protests. They started in Berkeley. They went down to Oakland. And our one reporter, Emily Raguso, covered them. The next day, we heard that Berkeley High School was going to have a walkout. And so Tracy and I went down there, and there was something really inspiring about these kids who are 14, 15, 16, and 17 walking off campus. We did a Facebook Live. That was our second Facebook Live thing. Tracy held the camera for about 3 hours. We had more than 600,000 impressions or whatever on that Facebook Live event, which was really extraordinary. And that was a lot of work. Once again, we were trying to feed in the pictures and the tweets and stuff we'd gotten from the community. But it was inspiring. And there's another thing that happens, I think, about covering a town and covering a small enough community where you feel like you're part of the community. I mean, we have gotten to know, and we know so many people in the community. We've written about them. And we don't have any anonymity, and we go out there and, you just feel this sense of connection that I think, it's like being an old-time, newspaper editor in a small Western town. I mean, you kind of feel like you know so many people, and you have your fingers on the pulse of things, and it's very gratifying. So even though it's exhausting, it can be also a lot of fun. So, Greg?
So, a burning question. December 6, 2014, I was at that protest, and so was my wife, and it was a fascinating thing. It was really intense. But we got all our information about where the protest was happening from your site. Which leads me to the question, are you actually influencing the news if you're covering, influencing the outcome if you're covering the event live?
Right. Did everyone hear that question? Yeah, I think probably we are. I mean,
in this case, it was a good thing, but who knows, right?
Who knows? That's right. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think sometimes, we've reported on police incidents and where their shootings are happening and things like that, and the police would rather not have that information out there because they're still gathering, evidence and things. It's not like people are flowing down there. But I think that's a reflection of the rise of Twitter in particular. I mean, there's so much real-time information out there, and if we funnel it into one place and allow people to see it easily, instead of just clicking on the hashtag, I do think we drive the news. But I think, we live in such a different, crazy news world now. It's just, it's not just Berkeleyside. It's everybody, sending out information and gathering information. So, yes?
I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this DPO because you use the word contribute, but you're actually selling equity.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said invest, yes.
Is there a secondary market? Is there?
No, there's no secondary market for this at this point. If Berkeleyside sells itself or is purchased, there will be a liquidation opportunity. But no, it's mostly not a liquid investment. And that's why we have to explain to people, if you're buying this, you're buying it for, yeah. When we're a Class B Corp, we try to do good. So it's really like an investment in the community is our argument, and I think people definitely understand that. Yes?
Do the investors in the DPO have any decision-making power in your coverage?
No, they have no decision-making power. They have no opportunity to influence our news gathering at all. We got a question, we got a series of emails from somebody who was concerned that our DPO investors would have outsized influence because they were richer than the average member, and that we would want to cater our news coverage in order to complement them. And we responded that we didn't think that was the case. I mean, if that was the case, we would be, crafting our news stories to, show our advertisers in a good light. And, it is hard in this small news operation to sort of have this divide between editorial and business. But we do. I mean, we haven't not written something that isn't complimentary about somebody. In fact, people are mad at us all the time. Believe me, we make people mad a lot. Yeah. No, I don't think we're that worried about it. In fact, most of the people who are investing are not involved in the public realm that much. They're just, business people. Yes?
Yeah, so, as a small local organization, it sounds like you rely on readers and the community to help you with the finding the news and even to some extent reporting the news. But I wonder if there are areas of coverage that you find particularly challenging to cover and kind of maintain reporting.
Mm-hmm. So I was emphasizing how readers help us find out the news, but we also find the news ourselves. I mean, we read city council agendas and, cover police and fire and all that stuff. So it is not only driven by readers. So yes, in fact, we have a lot of trouble covering the news, and that has to do with the fact that Berkeley just has so much news. I mean, it has a huge university. It has so many really, really smart, interesting people who are doing great things. We don't only want to write about city government. We like to write about, like today, I don't know if you can help me find that picture. We wrote an article about a commissioner who had been in jail, who'd written a play in jail that had won this big award, and it was going to be performed at a reading by Ed Asner in L.A., but the warden decided that it shouldn't be shown. And now, many, many years later, he finally got the play produced on Alcatraz. And so, okay. So we like to write a lot of stories like that. So, but yeah, we that's what we want to hire another reporter with the money from the DPO because.
So that maybe leads to my next
Yeah.
question, which is if you had money to buy to hire another reporter, would you put them on a particular beat or are where the place is?
Okay, so that's the good question. Will we put the reporter on a particular beat? Sort of yes and no. There's so much news in Berkeley that we all have to cover all of it. So we have like two of us do. Well, that's not even true. I would say we all chip in to do city coverage because there's just so much. And we all chip in to do a lot of things. I think if we have a new reporter, we would have that reporter spend a lot more time on school coverage. I mean, I think that's one of the areas that we don't cover as well as we might. But it also just takes a lot of work. Okay, so here is the story I'm talking about. It's about this Dan McMullen, who is city commissioner. He's formerly homeless. He now sits on a city commission. Here's a picture of him. And he wrote this play, Blythe. And, I just think it was a really nice general interest story. It not only showed sort of this great symmetry, written in prison, performed in prison, but it also talked about his evolution, from being a person incarcerated to being a homeless person to being a person in the community who helps other people who are down on their, who have hard times. So, yes?
So, you're taking $800,000 to try and increase the revenue so it's sustainable. What kind of revenue are you looking for? Like, what would be sustainable?
So we think if $1 million a year would be sustainable for us, and we're about halfway there now. So we're never going to be a really large news organization unless someone decides to give us a few $1 million to do Oakland side or something like that. We have a vertical site that's called Nosh, which is a food site. We'd like to do some other vertical sites, maybe about real estate or entertainment. We have some other ideas about how to bring in revenue that we just don't have the people power to put into place. So I think if we just double our size, that's about as big as we really want to be. Yes?
Have you considered, or do you think there's an opportunity for some of these small news organizations to roll up Voice of San Diego, Cal Matters, Berkeleyside?
To roll up together?
To roll up together.
That's a hard one. The problem, so AOL tried to do Patch. It tried to scale local on, make it into something big, and it didn't work. I think it probably would not really work, with disparate sites like Voice of San Diego and Berkeleyside, in part because so much of our advertising that is sold is regional. I just don't, see a lot of, big California companies wanting to have ads appear in both places. Also, editorially, the products are so completely different that I think it would be hard to be under one roof of a place that isn't trying to do the same thing. I mean, maybe we would be able to do a San Francisco side or a Emeryville side or something. I mean, there could be a possibility of joining forces with another news organization, but I think it would have to be very similar. So just because we just don't have management. I mean, we are just very thin, and I think having been involved in organizations that have merged and had it explode, I mean, it's not easy to merge culture, so you have to really plan it very carefully. So, yes?
What does Berkeley Daily Planet think about?
What is Berkeley Daily Planet? So, Berkeley, so you're from Berkeley or you have lived in there?
I was a student.
Yeah. So the Berkeley Daily Planet was, Berkeley has a very long history of independent news sites, as it turns out, news organizations. There was the Berkeley Barb, there was a lot other alternative papers, there was the Berkeley Gazette. When the mainstream Berkeley Gazette folded, I guess it was a few years later, something called the Berkeley Daily Planet started, and it was a daily newspaper for a very long time, and it went out of business because it was facing some of the issues that all newspapers face, and also it turned out that its bookkeeper had not been sending the workman compensation funds to the state, but had pocketed the money. So the owners were all of a sudden forced to pay back this money. They couldn't they couldn't afford to do that. So they folded the news operation, and they have an online site only. And it's mostly commentary. We are an objective news site. We have professional reporters. They are very, they have a certain point of view, and the stories that they run represent that point of view. And we often don't see eye to eye on things. Sometimes the editor, sort of says some very not such nice things about us. But, they have their audience, and we have our audience too. But, yes?
Are you direct selling all of your ad inventory?
Yes, we are.
So none of it's like getting placed by AdSense?
No. So we have 2 ad salespeople. So, yeah.
Do you have diversity targets as you grow?
In terms of our staffing and stuff, absolutely. That's a big issue for us. We are all white. Our diversity comes from our freelancers and our interns, and that's we've actually been very good on that side. We've had so many great people come and write for us for 3 months or 6 months at a time. But you have to remember, we really have the 3 of us who founded it are white, and we hired 1 reporter, and she was white, and so we haven't hired any other reporters. We hired an editor who's also white. So yeah, it's a big issue. And, I think it's one of our challenges. So, yes?
How did you initially launch and establish credibility amongst the community? Did you go around and sort of...
How did we launch and establish credibility? That's a really good question. Well, we launched into this abyss at first. It's like, hello, we're out here. Anyone hear us? The credibility was just built up with time. I mean, I think, all of us are very seasoned reporters. We were just, we were producing copy that was really excellent. For a long time, we had a business relationship with the New York Times. They had this local section, and we did a lot of copy for the local section. So I think people just saw that our stories were good stories. And I brought up the December 2014 protests. You notice we didn't even call them the Black Lives Matter protests in the headline, because that was just the beginning of the eruption of the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that was a pivotal time, because people really saw what we were doing, and we were, presenting trustworthy reporting and non-biased reporting. And so I think that established a lot of trust. So yeah, we are pretty trusted in our community. There are people who love to go in our comments and not trust us, but that's part of online journalism. So, yes?
That reminded me. So, do you have to curate your comments and deal with trolls and other things in there?
Yeah, so we do. So we had, yes, we do curate our comments. For a long time, we did not curate our comments. We allowed anonymous comments. Lance Noble, who's back there, who's one of the founders, he has always made a good point that you can't really require people to give their real names, because they'll just use fake email addresses. So we allowed a lot of guest comments, and that turned out to be a problem, because there was a lot of slamming of stories. And we did end up banning a few people because they were just trolling. They'd go on and they'd just over-comment, or they'd attack people. So then we revamped our comments policy, and we're trying to make it more civil. And then we changed to a policy where you didn't have to use your real name, but you had to use an avatar. You could no longer be on there as guest. And we encourage people to develop online personas. And that's worked pretty well. We don't allow too much back and forth between commenters at sort of attacking one another's point of view either. But, I think this is a very big issue for us. It's a big issue for a lot of online sites. Some sites have cut off comments because it's just gotten out of control. But we don't want to do that, because we are a community news site. But at the same time, sometimes it's hard to keep up with the comments. We can get hundreds and hundreds of comments on a story, and sometimes you're just sort of clicking and approving them. You're reading through them quickly, and you don't notice something that's objectionable, and then people say something. So, yeah, we're hoping that someone comes up. Maybe someone at the Brown Institute can develop a better commenting system. I think everybody would look forward to that. So, yes?
Aren't you imposing a type of politically correct orthodoxy when you talk like this?
About comments?
Yes. I mean, ideally, a human being can read and discern whether someone is speaking from a mind of clarity or junk. The sad thing is, much of our media today in America uses junk and gibberish and noise. It doesn't focus on any universal principles. It does not educate the public. It is by and large noise and junk. It's designed to create the illusion that there is something going on. And yet the agendas are easy to see.
So I do not think Berkeleyside is one of those kinds of sites. Some commenters have objected to the fact that the comments are moderated. They agree with you. It should be free and unfettered discussion. However, we found that allowing free and unfettered discussion meant that commenters would use a lot of code words that we found were, that readers found were racist or sexist or, slammed one group or another. And it got to be the point where it was so depressing sometimes to read the comments that it just really, really turned people off. And what we say to people if they get mad, oh, you're, moderating the comments, it's censorship. We say, sorry, that's our policy, and you're perfectly free to start your own news site. And you can go to Reddit and find people having those exchanges that they might not be able to make on a site like Berkeleyside or the New York Times or something like that. It's just, it is...
Explain to me, you use the terms racist and sexist. Those themselves seem like moral judgments, and yet everyone from the 60s on has been out to ban all moral judgments. So are you reintroducing the notion of sin and redefining it in terms of sexism and racism? And if so, what makes this new tolerance inform of intolerance?
I just am going to have to disagree with you. I actually think that a form of judgment on comments is actually encouraging more free flow exchange of ideas. It's not people are not intimidated in the comments when they have people attacking them for saying things and stuff like that. Clearly, you're not going to agree with how we approach our approach to comments. There are lots of different news sites on the web. That's the beauty of it, and I'm sure you can find sites that don't, regulate comments and thus aren't making moral judgments. So, yes?
How much of your staff time does your comment moderation system wind up consuming?
That's a good question. I've never thought of that. It's not,
I would say an hour a day, maybe?
Yeah.
It's a lot. I would say it's a lot.
From the entire organization or per editorial staff?
Maybe.
From the entire organization.
Yeah. So, it really depends on the subject. Talking about the kids going out and marching after Trump or during these Black Lives Matter, there was a lot of feeling and people were really letting go. So that could be just we can get hundreds of comments in a very short period of time.
I would also add that we've approved 99.9%
Yeah.
of the comments. We very rarely have reason to delete or modify a comment.
And do you explain to people when you?
Yeah, we do.
Not always.
Well, we try, but sometimes they use fake email addresses.
Right.
But if we delete or take something out, or we try and tell them why we're doing it, but often we can't actually reach them.
How do they take your explanations?
Sometimes fine.
No, actually, we've had some really, once you tell people why, we're asking them to maybe stop sending comments and, whatever. Sometimes people come in like, it's like a sort of deluge, one every 10 minutes or something, or maybe they're being very offensive, very rude, or attacking people that have been talked about in the story. If you explain what you're doing, we actually do get some good feedback. We get, okay, I get it, I fess up, I'll try and
So Greg's here, we got to end. I just want to say one thing. Making Berkeleyside has been a really empowering experience as a journalist, and I think it's something that you guys as students can take with you in the world. I mean, there is the opportunity to create your own sort of media organization or media message. I mean, the web has its problems, you know, there's all this fake news, but there is the possibility also to make an impact and to write the kind of news that you want to write. And, you know, it's possible to do it. And I think we're an example of that, you know. We started with no great ambition, as Lance puts it, and I think we've really ended up creating something that has community impact. So thank you.
Beautiful words. So thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to see you all. I think there will soon be a section about commenting on the comments on your site. It'll be very popular. And our next lecture is on Friday, December 9th. And then after that, we start with another series in the spring, right? So thanks for coming and happy Thanksgiving. That was outstanding. So